Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Coaches Exploring the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People from a Principles Behind Clarity perspective. And this week, we're diving into habit 4, win-win. But before we get there, in the book, we're into part 3, public victory. And it starts off with a bunch of stuff around that's titled The Paradigms of Interdependence. And the main kind of concept here in this part is something that I've been really struck by since I first picked this book up in the early 2000s, is the emotional bank account. And if you think about a regular bank account, there's deposits and withdrawals, and the concept here, or the metaphor of the emotional bank account, works the exact same way, except in the realm of human interaction. So as you're interacting with people, you're either making a deposit or a withdrawal. And a few key things. This really was resonating with me this time as I read through, because I just finished a course with some retail managers, and this is a concept that I bang on about a lot with them. And the biggest thing is that the person who determines whether something's a deposit or a withdrawal is the receiver. So you may think it's a deposit, but unless the person receiving it thinks it's a deposit, it's not necessarily a deposit. So it makes it a little tricky, because it's not kind of universal or standard across all people in all situations. And even the context, something that could be a deposit today may not be a deposit tomorrow for that very same person, because the context has changed, or the circumstances around them have changed. But it's just an interesting thing. And I often point with my retail managers that I work with, when they're having issues with a staff member or whatnot, the first place I point them to is just getting some awareness around where is their emotional bank account with that person. And almost without exception, if they're having a problem with somebody, their emotional bank account is very low. They're very withdrawn with that person. There's low trust. The person doesn't feel safe around them, doesn't feel valued by them, et cetera, et cetera. And you can imagine all the things that come out of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
just as you're speaking, Greg, I'm just kind of thinking as well, in an emotional bank account, how often we can get caught up in um, if we don't have clarity on where our experience comes from, on a kind of an IOU kind of mindset and behavior, which, could show up and be counterproductive in a working relationship sort of situation, or in a family relationship, or any relationship. Somebody is feeling, and indeed, of course, we go on to, sort of the idea of win-win or win-lose, but the idea of, somebody is, when you're played with, let's say, you bet on something that is emotional, you can easily see how it's, get into a kind of less than feeling. And anything that may consequently follow when you're feeling less than your counterpart, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
this, to your point about experience and what we know about where your experience is coming from. On the one hand, you could say, well, the emotional bank account doesn't apply, because anything that somebody's feeling is coming from them, not from you anyway.
That's right.
However, it's things like common courtesies and being nice, or being straightforward. I don't know if I've used this example before, but I had one manager. So she and another lady weren't getting along, her subordinate, and there was something about the way she was interacting with customers that she didn't like. She was hesitating to correct this person's behavior or bring it to their awareness, because she was afraid. She was afraid we don't have a good relationship, he's going to take it wrong, whatever. Anyway, so I coached her around how to approach it and whatnot. And to make a long story short, she talked to her about it, and sure enough, the lady had no real awareness that it wasn't a proper behavior or proper way to deal with customers. And once it got kind of exposed, she realized, oh, okay. And the next day, or I don't know, very shortly after, a customer sought out the manager to give her a compliment about this employee, about how great she was with customer service. So, my takeaway from that was, here's this incident that she was terrified of addressing, thinking it was going to be a withdrawal to deal with. And it ended up being a huge deposit because it opened the doorway for her to become a much better employee and ambassador for the company and deal with customers properly. And the person's self-esteem was through the roof because now customers were like going out of their way to compliment how great she is with the customer service. So it's kind of interesting.
Interesting, and I think it you could take this even much further. I'm just thinking, as he says, you know, the emotional bank account. If I make deposits into an emotional bank account with you through courtesy, kindness, honesty, and keeping my commitment to you, I build up a reserve. Well, if we think about it, those things are, according to the principles, they are already in your nature. They are innate in you. Mm. So there isn't much of a reserve to build up except that awareness of them. So I'm thinking of the lady who couldn't, you know, she couldn't bring herself to maybe correct the behavior that she thought was incorrect or whatever. But if she knew where her experience was coming from and that all those things, she already has the ability to be able to correct that behavior or address it. Let's say we're not correcting anything, but you address it with her employee or whatever, there wouldn't have been any problem in the first place because the lady would have had a much stronger grounding and ability to deal with a situation that is indeed an inside situation, not an outside one.
Yeah.
For me too, reading through this, it really hit home that in coaching, the power of connection, of holding a space for somebody, like the notion of people just want to be understood.
Yep.
And what we're doing as coaches is making huge deposits into people's emotional bank accounts when we just sit there and listen to them, and they feel that connection, they feel that trust, the lack of judgment, the openness, deposit.
Yeah.
Yep. Your bank account should be overflowing today, Elaine. It should be overflowing after our conversation this morning. No, that speaks deeply to me. And also where when it goes on to speak not about to move out of the emotional bank out and starts talking about ourselves, where he goes here. So the place to begin building any relationship is inside ourselves. He goes on to say inside our circle of influence, inside our own character. But that speaks directly to everything that we believe about the principles. If we don't start there, we can't build an emotional bank account with someone else if we don't start there.
Yeah.
If we're not in that place in and of ourselves. So yeah.
And this part on 222, the golden rule, kind of resonated with me because of my Christian upbringing, and the golden rule was kind of always top of mind. But it says the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. While on the surface that could mean to do for them what you would like to have done for you, I think the more essential meaning is to understand them deeply as individuals the way you would want to be understood, and then to treat them in terms of that understanding. So I was like, wow, that's such a deeper meaning to the golden rule. And it really resonated for me as a coach of, understanding somebody's world and treating them from that place, from the context of their own world. And through this whole thing, I mean, emotional bank account, the two words or three words, I guess, that were ringing in my head the whole time was the Sid Banks, love and understanding. Like that's, the core of this whole thing.
I actually, that came to me when I was making my final notes, and I pulled up, that's so funny you said that, Greg. I pulled up the quote because I was thinking, I know there's something in my mind here for the whole, this piece, the paradigms of interdependence and the whole win-win thing. what struck me was that whole love and understanding in the quote, if I may read it, is
Yeah,
because
go
I
for
pulled it up. Love and understanding harmonize the mind of humanity to its true inner nature. What you give in life is what you receive. To give love is to receive love. A mind full of love and good feelings can never go wrong. And that somehow, through all of this, through the paradigms and through all of the win-win, it's about that. It's about connection. It's about love. It's about understanding. It's about starting with yourself. And yeah, that really, so it was kind of rang true for me.
I love that, Lynn. It's and again, it's always, although, you know, the whole of Stephen Covey in this book, of course, he's talking about relationships, and in particular, let's say, leadership roles or relationships within an organization. But this, it's so clear how this is so, it's basic, you know, and the relationship at the beginning always starts with self. Before you can either entertain another, it's got to be clear for you. So sort of from one already, you can make two from one, but you can't make one from two, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it speaks to grounding, I think, what you're saying too. It's like, you know, it all, like everything. It starts with, you know, Jamie says the most important person to be calibrating is yourself.
Yeah.
Right. In the realm of interdependence or relationship building, if you're not grounded, if you're not in that place yourself, then it's going to be impossible to have a connection with somebody.
Yeah. And Lynn and I coined a phrase this morning, which was it's not even, you know, inside out, it's inside in. That's where the relationship starts, let's say. Understanding the relationship between the various parts of your being.
Yeah.
And starting from there. So inside in that kind of sense. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny when you say that, I think of the I don't know if this was a Sid quote or something, but it's something about like there is no outside. Like there is only the, like, inside in makes sense to me because the whole thing is inside. It's the only thing we can experience.
Yeah.
Is an inside job.
Yeah.
So moving out of emotional bank account into habit for itself, think win-win. I love Covey's stories, and in this one he opens up with this story about some business person he was working with who had problems with his people and the sales. They weren't cooperating and all this stuff. And he says, "Is your problem the people or the paradigm?" And the guy goes, "Well, look for yourself." And on the surface, it appeared to be the people, but then it ended up, no, it was the whole paradigm and the system, and all the rest of it. And it's funny because when I first came across this in the early 2000s, when I was working in the grocery business, we used to do these sales contests with the stores, and this kind of paralleled what our experience was. We would do a sales contest, and, you know, the top 3 stores would win a prize and the other 100 stores would get nothing. And guess what? Every contest, it was the same 3 stores, maybe just, you know, one contest, number 1 would be number 3, number 3 would be number 1 or whatever, but it was the same 3 jostling for those top positions, and nobody else did anything. They weren't really participating. And then I took this to my boss and said, you know, we're going about this all wrong. We need a win-win contest. And he was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" So I devised a scheme whereby the best store kind of set the benchmark for what the performance target was. And then if any other store was within, say, 10% of that top store, then they also won. And so instead of having 3 stores participating in every contest, we all of a sudden had, you know, more than 50% of the stores participating. There was always the bottom stores that, you know, as soon as you send out the details for the contest, they already go, there's no way I can win, so I'm not even going to try. But over time, as we did these contests, more people started participating because they realized that no, they could win. And it didn't matter how many people won. Like the goal was everyone should win. And of course, my boss was like freaking out because he's like, well, what if everyone wins? That's going to cost us a fortune. They said, yeah, but if everyone wins, that means we will have sold X millions of dollars of product. So you can afford it. Like, who cares? Like, isn't that what you want? Anyway, it totally changed the way we did this contest for probably a good 2.5, 3 years. And then, as Covey talks about here, in terms of structuring it so that where you should be cooperating, you build the system to cooperate. So within the four walls of the store, they all cooperated with each other, the different departments. But the regional operations managers, they ended up, they would take their 10 stores and they would create a competition with, the guy in the other region. So to see if his 10 stores can be better than the other guy's 10 stores, and they would have a little friendly competition. Anyway, it really took on a life of its own. And it was like, it just blew my mind how something so simple as what Covey describes here, it's changing the system and the paradigm, totally, we had this one item called No Name. The brand is called No Name Trail Mix, which is like a mix of seeds and nuts and whatever, granola. Our banner sold more trail mix in one quarter than the entire business had sold in the previous year, just because it was put on part of this contest and every store executed it. So I don't know. I don't know if the legend of the No Name Trail Mix has been forgotten in the Loblaws business, but for a number of years, it was like even the most senior people would talk about what a great success that was.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Just that this chapter, the whole concept, just the very idea, win-win. It really is mind blowing, and the only thing that struck me was that, whether so let's say this is, as he says just at the end of page 237, win-win is a frame of mind and heart that constantly seeks mutual benefit in all human interactions. And then he also, a little bit later, and a balance between courage and consideration. He says that later on. Involves having integrity and, let's say, and maturity. He also speaks about emotional maturity and an abundance mentality. The only, let's say, little caveat I sort of see in that is that because it requires cooperation and collaboration, it requires that him exposing this, let's say, to one or many, requires that everybody, or he suggests rather, that people take on or create or have or get or obtain a mindset. Well, then that will entirely depend on somebody's point of view, whether they want it or not. But if we come from a principles perspective, and think about the idea that the idea of win-win from a principles perspective, let's say, in that abundance, maturity, integrity, courage, consideration are perhaps already resident within us. So we don't need to or acquire it or seek it. It's already there to be used within a collaborative attempt. But it would require that people, of course, are pointed in that direction to say, hey guys, your kind of negative approach can never work long term, because your natural spirit, your natural inner self will always guide you in the right direction to make it a win-win situation anyway. And that's just kind of the only little bit that sort of jumped out at me. That is that you don't actually even have to acquire the mindset or have a mindset, because you've already got it, really.
I think for me, the way you've described that is the key is that they have to have an insight. Like the insight is what unlocks all those attributes that are already there within them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and perhaps had I said that better, perhaps a collaborative attempt between, let's say, Jamie Smart, Sid Banks, and Stephen Covey would rewrite, may he rest in peace, of course, Stephen Covey, would rewrite to sort of induce an insight around the win-win thinking to the readers, if you like.
It's funny because there's a model that we used to use called the 5F model. When we got shown this originally at work, it was people's reaction to change, but it was like on the one end of the continuum was foe. I think it went foe, fighter, fence sitter, friend, and family. And the idea was that, so we launched this new contest and everyone is going to sit somewhere in those 5 Fs: foe, fighter, fence sitter, friend, or family. And the idea was to focus on the family and friend end of the continuum and celebrate the victories and so on. And people on the other end of the continuum, they would start having insights. Basically, I never thought about it that way until just this moment, but they would have insights that, oh my, what are those guys doing over there? That's so, they look like they're having fun. They're having so much success. Maybe I won't resist this as much. I'll be open to trying this, to sell these products and see what happens. Maybe I can do it. And I'm seeing it all now framed in terms of insight. And as each person or store would have an insight around what they were capable of or what was possible for them, they would kind of move along that continuum. And instead of having, say, an equal distribution of people across all 5 categories, the idea was to really distribute wanted as many people in that friend and family side of the equation as possible. And that's kind of how it ended up working out. The other thing that's jumping out at me, just that I hadn't thought about prior to this conversation, was in all this talk about emotional bank account and relationships and win-win, win-win, win-lose, lose-win, I'm just starting to think about it in the context of self, right? Like, what about your relationship with yourself? Do we make deposits in our own emotional bank account, or are we making withdrawals when we beat ourselves up or dwell on our limiting beliefs, et cetera, et cetera? Do we go for win-win with ourselves? I can think of lots of examples where I've gone for lose-lose or lose-win or win-lose or whatever. So I'm just, this whole element of it is kind of just exploding in front of my eyes right now as we're talking about.
Sort of just describes, you've just described a bit better what I was, I think, trying to say before, the idea that the whole thing has to start from self, the relationship within, before it can expand into any organization, if you know what I mean.
And I can almost see like this, the relationship between who you really are and your ego, in terms of the relationship element of this, and can you do things that are a win-win for you? Like the places where your ego really puts up a fight is probably because however it's been arranged or set up, it feels to the ego like it's a lose-win, like the situation. And it's resisting that.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And if we're stepping up, just to go a bit further on from there, if we're in a work situation, or if you take any of the scenarios you just went through, Greg, if you have those groups of people and they're in that situation, and within themselves they're not in a win-win place, putting debits into the emotional bank account of other people, that's kind of hard because you're not there for yourself. If you're not doing that within yourself, you might find that a struggle to do for other people. So it takes us right back to that's a really cool way to look at it.
It's interesting because I've seen with lots of people that they're great at making other people happy and making deposits for other people, but they don't take care of themselves. Like they'll it's funny. I posted the other day the 7 habits of highly ineffective people. I don't know if you saw my post, and I had one of my LinkedIn connections reply saying number 7, which is the real habit, number 7, is sharpen the saw. which is all about taking care of yourself. And the habit 7 of highly ineffective people is burn yourself out. And it was like number 7 always. And I thought there's so many people out there who it sounds absurd that somebody would set themselves up as a habit to burn themselves out, but so many people operate as if that was their goal. And I think those people are doing so many things for other people, but they're not taking care of themselves.
Yeah, and that sounds like a huge emotional deposit.
Yeah,
sort of all, but not you're not depositing it in your own account. You're depositing it somewhere else.
And it's a lose-win, right? Like everyone else is winning, but ultimately you're going to lose because you're going to off work or in the hospital or worse.
Yeah.
I really see this whole win-win. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say it's actually in the paragraph he writes, more than a paragraph he writes with about win-lose. Indeed, it would be taken from the understanding, and he says it's about the third bigger paragraph when he says, whenever love is given on a conditional basis, like there's the misunderstanding. When you're giving love on a conditional basis, you're also going to burn out very quickly. You can see that it's staring you in the face. And of course, again, from a principal's point of view, we know that love by nature is unconditional. And it can never come from that place, not in the true sense that is going to give you a huge emotional win, let's say, with yourself and with others. Yeah.
In that same party, I found it interesting that he talked about psychosomatic illnesses, particularly with respiratory, nervous, and circulatory system stuff, like just how living from a lose-win paradigm manifests itself into physical symptoms in our bodies. And kind of to what you were talking about earlier, it's like it's such a misalignment of our true nature and so our system will kick back and you'll get sick.
and it's just speaking up. It's finally speaking up, like, I can't stand this anymore. Stop, screaming at you. Hence the in the real physical expression.
And that's working with Ollie and trying to fix my knee injury. That's exactly the conclusion we've come to, is like, you're the pain doctor is trying to send you a message here that the path that you're on is not working out for you there.
Not working.
Yeah.
Clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very clever.
It's very clever.
Wisdom has a way of being clever.
Wisdom has a way of being clever.
And we're very, the ego is very, very clever, as you mentioned it before, at telling you it's something else, which of course we know it never is.
The ego has a very good press secretary.
Oh yeah. Yes, exactly.
Top notch.
Making up stories.
Yeah. Does indeed.
I thought a lot about this win-win too in the context of coaching, right? Like we're really trying to create a win-win scenario or relationship with our clients. Even I've been on this enrollment course recently, but just learning about enrolling people in a vision of a better life for themselves and so on. But it's, the win-win nature of a coaching relationship. Like, you should hire me as your coach because I can help you get all these things that you want. And I win because I get to have you as a client and help you get there. Like, it's, I really see the whole coaching relationship as kind of the epitome of a win-win construct.
Yeah. And it for us, I'm kind of thinking for us coaches and maybe not everybody, I'm sure not everybody. So I'll perhaps speak for myself. When there are doubts and difficulties, as if you're starting out as a coach, in having those clients, because a lot of the the difficulties that you're going to be facing are indeed around your own emotional deposits in whether you're winning or losing in any given situation with the client. But when we kind of realize that the only way forward, or have a deep belief and trust that win-win is the only way forward, then that kind of consolidates the grounding in the work that you do. It's sort of a kind of a pre-idea, if you like, something that has to be in place before you start. Otherwise, you're working on shaky ground. You know, if it's win-lose or lose-win or lose-lose or whatever, or win-lose, it you know, anything other than that is gonna well knock the wind out your sails, I think. You know, moving forward with clients, perhaps from that aspect.
I pulled out which it's kind of spoke to me around the coaching piece. I think it's page 254, so it's skipping on a little bit, where he goes through on the bottom of the page there, the desired results, the guidelines, the resources, accountability, consequences. And just reading through those, that's exactly the conclusion that I came to, that the combination of those things are win-win in all relationships, whether it's our coaching relationships or our personal relationships or relationships at work. So the resources, to me, that speaks to what you've got going for you. So when we're thinking about our clients and their resources, that's what they've got going for them. We know that we can rely on that because they can rely on that. That's going to do the work for them. And then just going through all these, that kind of spoke to me directly to, you know, that's, if we trust in that, then there only is win-win. And, you know, are learning from them and they're learning from us. And,
yeah, when I read that, I thought of that, it's like a blueprint for a good coaching proposal.
Yeah. Desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, consequences. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it spoke directly there to as well. There was something about encouraging creativity, which is, you know, what we're always trying to do.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Elaine, the maturity, and I highlighted this on 248. Maturity is the balance between courage and consideration. And I love the fact that the word courage came up so many times here, because, you know, Jamie bangs on about courage all the time. And again, to me, it was just, here's just another example of the alignment between what the 7 habits are pointing to and what the principles are pointing to. And, you know, the example I gave before about that manager having to address something with her employee, like all she needed was a little bit of courage, and off to the races. So,
this I've just noticed I've just highlighted practically the 2 pages from halfway down page 250, 251. And I didn't highlight anything in particular, but I've just made a little side note. And what I've written is there's some aspect of when we move away from the idea of those labels that identify us, you know, like I'm courageous, I'm not courageous, I'm a good salesperson, I'm a bad salesperson, I'm a nice, whatever those labels are, that when through it, because it's speaking to something, or as I say, I haven't underlined which bit, but it's something about how Stephen Covey doesn't use the word, but it's speaking to the connection and how we can, like, when we're connected and when we can see in ourselves that we're not the label, but we can see our true identity, when the true identity contains perhaps a notion of the label, if you like. So in the case of courage, you know, it's not a label that you can acquire. It's something that you have. As again, I say, I didn't really underline anything particular, but that seemed to be relevant in the idea of the abundance mentality, and the idea that, again, it's not something we don't need to add anything. It's subtractive. We don't need to add stuff to have abundance.
Yeah.
So we don't, the courage is already there. We don't need to go out and look for some courage today, guys. You might not find it, it's already there. Yeah. And the same as, he compares it to the scarcity mentality. Well, no, because again, that implies that you're lacking something. Well, of course, we're not lacking anything.
This whole scarcity abundance thing really, I don't want to oversimplify things, but it seemed to me at the time like every major problem in the world that's going on right now is a function of the scarcity mentality.
Yeah. Right.
Like in order for me to get a bigger piece of the pie, you need to take a smaller piece of the pie.
You need to suffer. Yeah.
And you don't have to look very far to see examples of that in the world. But I love when he says the abundance mentality, on the other hand, flows out of the deep inner sense of personal worth and security. And to me, that again, that's pointing to our true nature, who we really are. Like when you're truly in touch with who you really are.
Yeah. The
abundance, it's not even a question. It's so obvious. Like I don't know, I think of it as there's enough pie for everyone. Like just have as big a piece as you want. Like it's okay. And I think for me in my own business, I've caught myself sometimes thinking about things from a scarcity perspective. But and then I think of Jamie, saying the universe is constantly throwing clients at you. You're just oblivious to it most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like there's enough out here for everybody.
Oh, indeed. And there's enough in each and every single one of us for a total sense of fulfillment, if you like. It doesn't even require the going out there again to get it, because we've already got that. Yeah. So it kind of cancels the idea of either abundance or scarcity.
Yeah.
It's just we each and every one of us, we just are enough, full stop.
I was just thinking, like, even if you took, say, the top 100 coaches in the world, and they each had 1,000 clients, right? Whatever that is, that's 100,000 people. Well, that's still 6 billion, 999 million, whatever the number is. Yeah. Like there's plenty of people out there.
There's plenty to go around. Yeah.
I highlighted the word Les Miserables because he was referring to plays and things, and that's I don't know if you guys have seen Les Mis, but it's one of my favorite favorite plays. Just before the pandemic, I had bought tickets for my wife and daughter and I to go see it, and it got canceled, and I've been waiting. It's coming back, I think, early next year, so I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yes.
On 253 says, because win-win is a principle, people can validate it in their own lives. You'll be able to bring most people to a realization that they will win more of what they want by going for what you both want. And to me, it was like his use of the word realization, him pointing to, the idea that because something's a principle, people can validate it for themselves. Jamie says all the time, because these are principles, I don't have to defend them or to prove them. Like they're self-evident. They're there for the scene, and people. So he always says, don't take anything I say as the truth. Go find out for yourself in your own experience, because he knows if the principles are what he thinks they are, then they're there to be discovered and experienced, and to ring true for everyone. So again, it was just
speaks
certain
to us, yeah.
key things that were kind of resonating with me.
Yeah. I don't know if did we mention just the last bit, just going back again, the last bit of the abundance mentality, and then, you know, he practically says it in, you know, he doesn't write it in capital letters, but it's almost, you know, but remember, if we search deeply enough within ourselves, beyond the scripting, beyond the learned attitudes and behaviors, the real validation of win-win, as well as every other correct principle, is in our own lives.
Mm.
Mm.
So I thought that kind of jumped out at me as well.
Within us.
Yeah.
One of the last things that I picked up on was it sort of felt like a little bit of a summary, I feel like. So it skips ahead a little bit to, I don't know what page now. Oh yeah, pretty much highlighted all of page 265. I don't know. That spoke to me quite a lot. But he says, win-win is not a personality technique, but it's rather a total paradigm of human interaction. And that just, it was kind of interesting that it was, yeah, well, it's kind of put at the end, it summarizes exactly that. And if we think about the principles and the notion of connection, and we're all connected, and there's nothing you can do about that, it just is. That's the only way it can transpire.
Just as you've said that, just the the notion of win-win, it's kind of like the non-duality. Like there isn't, the true nature of the universe is win-win. It's one thing.
Yeah, it's one. Yeah.
It's that's so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's funny, I wrote down another Sid quote actually before we came on, which was, we are one with no separation except for the illusion we have of our bodies. Which I think I wrote that down after I read that, the total paradigm of human interaction, because that felt like that, the oneness.
Nice.
Does that seem like a good place to bring this to a close?
Yeah, I like that.
And next time we're going to do habit 5, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Which, if there's ever been a habit that's related to coaching, that's got to be
coaching.
one.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks so much, guys. That was fun.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.